The scene rewinds to the moment Mary took out a peculiar black pill, insisting it was for the pregnant Jenny's benefit. Mary, with a hint of pride, presented the dubious pill to us.
This pill ensures a male baby. If taken for 3 months, it can turn a female fetus into a male one. It's rare and precious.
She elaborated on her efforts to acquire these pills and handed them over to Jenny with great care. Jenny's face lit up, eager to verify the pill's authenticity.
Are you sure this works?
Ask Emily. She's a graduate student.
Their eyes fell on me, and memories of my previous life flooded back. Jenny had been pregnant with twins, and during a checkup, she found out it was a boy and a girl. Mary had secretly bought these so-called gender-changing pills, hoping to alter the baby's gender. I knew these pills were a scam. Taking unknown substances for 3 months could harm both mother and fetus. I had advised them against it for Jenny's health, and they eventually heeded my advice.
Being a graduate student doesn't mean I know everything. When it comes to raising children, someone with experience like you, Mom, has the most authority.
Mary smiled contentedly and urged Jenny to take the pill. This time, I wanted to see if, without my intervention, my niece would really turn into a boy as they wished. Later, my niece was born safely. However, Mary, with her preference for boys over girls, treated her harshly. I protected her, shielding her from such biased thoughts, and taught her that women are no less than men. I thought my genuine care would be reciprocated, but instead, I raised an ungrateful person. My niece and my nephew, who had a rare condition, conspired to push me down the stairs when I was injured. I didn't pass away immediately after the fall, but my cries for help were met with mockery from my niece and nephew. Eventually, I succumbed to excessive bleeding. The pain of that moment seemed to resurface vividly. I smiled innocently at Mary and Jenny.
Being a graduate student doesn't mean I know everything. When it comes to raising children, someone with experience like you, Mom, has the most authority.
Seeing that I didn't oppose her, Mary smiled contentedly and urged Jenny to take the pill. This time, I wanted to see if, without my intervention, my niece would really turn into a boy as they wished. The company organized a dinner, and I returned home late that night. A single light was left on, and John was sitting under it, his handsome face glowing in the soft yellow light. If I hadn't known, in my soul's state after my passing, that the car accident that took my parents' lives was orchestrated by John, I might have continued to be deceived by him.
Emily, Mom and I talked today. She wants to book a postpartum care center for our sister in advance.
He watched my expression as he spoke, and seeing that I didn't seem displeased, he pushed further, suggesting that I handle it.
This is women's business. What do I know about it? Why don't you take care of it?
John was the first college graduate from his village and had always been proud and chauvinistic. I pushed his hands off my shoulders, pretending to be tired, and rubbed my temples.
If you don't have time, let Mom and our sister handle it themselves. I don't know much about it either.
John looked disapproving.
Mom and Jenny aren't familiar with these things.
It definitely needs.
I couldn't help but give him a cold look and questioned.
Needs what? Needs me to do it, right?
John fell silent.
If you don't want to put in the effort, then contribute financially. Ask Jenny's husband how much he's willing to spend on the care center, and I'll find someone to help.
John looked incredulous and stammered.
We're all family. Why talk about money?
Of course, they didn't want to talk about money. With me always taking on everything, why would they willingly spend their own money? I turned over and lay on the bed, and John quickly moved closer, his hands restlessly touching me. I reflexively pushed his hands away, remembering that he was responsible for my parents' deaths, and couldn't hide my disgust.
I have to get up early tomorrow. Don't disturb me.
I placed a pillow between us to create some distance and ignored John's dissatisfaction. Emily's niece was born safely, but Mary, who had always favored boys, treated the girl harshly. Emily protected her niece, shielding her from biased thoughts and teaching her that women are equal to men. However, her genuine care was not reciprocated. Instead, she raised an ungrateful person.
Cheerful, being a graduate student doesn't mean I know everything. When it comes to raising children, someone with experience like you, Mom, has the most authority.
Seeing no opposition from Emily, Mary smiled contentedly and urged Jenny to take the pill. Emily decided to see if, without her intervention, her niece would really turn into a boy as they wished. My niece and nephew, who had a delicate condition, conspired to push me down the stairs when I was injured. I didn't die immediately after the fall, but my cries for help were met with mockery from them. Eventually, I succumbed to excessive bleeding. The pain from that moment resurfaced vividly. I smiled innocently at Mary and Jenny.
Being a graduate student doesn't mean you know everything. When it comes to raising children, someone with experience like me has the most authority.
Seeing that I didn't oppose her, Mary smiled contentedly and urged Jenny to take the pill. This time, I wanted to see if, without my intervention, my niece would really turn into a boy as they wished. My niece and my nephew, who had a rare condition, conspired to push me down the stairs when I was injured. I didn't die immediately after the fall, but my cries for help were met with mockery from my niece and nephew. Eventually, I succumbed to excessive bleeding. The pain of that moment seemed to resurface vividly. I smiled innocently at Mary and Jenny.
Being a graduate student doesn't mean you know everything. When it comes to raising children, someone with experience like you, Mom, has the most authority.
Seeing that I didn't oppose her, Mary smiled contentedly and urged Jenny to take the pill. This time, I wanted to see if, without my intervention, my niece would really turn into a boy as they wished. By the time the chaotic Hong family realized I hadn't returned for several days, I had already settled into my new home in the city where I was reassigned. John called me.
Then you can transfer some money to my account and help Jenny buy baby supplies.
No, I won't.
How can you not have money? Didn't your parents leave you 4 houses, 2 cars, and millions in savings?
In my previous life, after I was pushed down the stairs by Jenny's children and died, John learned the truth from the home surveillance footage. But they didn't report it. Instead, they claimed I died accidentally, quickly cremated me, and then legally took over all my assets as my spouse.
This conversation is over.
Mary and John called several times asking for money, but they failed each time. Not knowing where I lived now, they could only rage helplessly over the phone. Occasionally, I would check on them through the home cameras. Jenny, having just given birth to 2 children, was struggling without me, the financial provider. Relying solely on John's meager salary, their living standards plummeted. Sometimes, I would see Jenny, exhausted and unrecognizable, dealing with the children. In my previous life, Mary and Jenny had left these burdens to me while they enjoyed a carefree life. This time, I wanted them to experience the challenges of raising a special needs child. I immersed myself in work, and within a year, I had firmly established myself in my new city. The Hong family, unable to benefit from me, grew increasingly cold, sometimes not calling for months, which suited me just fine. I hadn't forgotten the matter that had weighed on my mind since my rebirth. During the car accident, I was in the car but had dozed off in the back seat after taking some medicine. When I woke up, the car was tumbling down a slope. Before the car exploded, John had pulled me out, leading me to believe he was my savior. John had accepted my misunderstanding without guilt, enjoying the benefits I brought. But after my death, I learned that my father had swerved to avoid John, who was driving drunk, causing the accident. The crash was attributed to my father's fatigue, and the case was closed. I began secretly gathering more detailed information about the accident that killed my parents, but it was challenging due to the time that had passed. The pain of that moment seemed to resurface vividly. I smiled innocently at Mary and Jenny.
Being a graduate student doesn't mean I know everything. When it comes to raising children, someone with experience like you, Mom, has the most authority.
Seeing that I didn't oppose her, Mary smiled contentedly and urged Jenny to take the pill. This time, I wanted to see if, without my intervention, my niece would really turn into a boy as they wished. After my niece was born, Mary, who always preferred boys, treated her harshly. I shielded my niece from her biased thoughts and taught her that women are just as strong as men. But my genuine care was not reciprocated. Instead, I raised an ungrateful person.
Why do you always interfere? You think you're better than my mom?
My niece and nephew, who had a rare condition, conspired against me. One day, they pushed me down the stairs when I was injured. I didn't die immediately, but my cries for help were met with mockery.
Look at her, struggling like that. Pathetic.
Help! Please, help me! Eventually, I succumbed to the injuries. I took the dash cam to Michael, a lawyer friend who had been helping me for the past 2 years. After the incident, John had removed and hidden the dash cam, which still contained the recording of the day my parents had their accident. The footage clearly showed the real cause of the accident 3 years ago that took my parents' lives. My father had swerved to avoid John's reckless driving, causing the car to plunge off a cliff and explode.
I'll look into the original owner of this dashcam, but it's been too long. Even if we reopen the case, you must be prepared for the possibility that he might not face severe punishment.
Thank you. Regardless of the outcome, I want him to get what he deserves.
The next day, before I could confront him, John came to me first. He pushed a divorce agreement towards me.
I've signed the divorce papers. Sign them, and we can part ways amicably.
I glanced at the agreement, which demanded a division of assets, leaving him with 2 houses, a car, and a substantial amount of money. I tore the agreement into pieces and threw them in his face.
You have no right to take my things.
If it weren't for me saving you back then, you wouldn't even be alive to have these things.
I'm only asking for these things now, which is already a bargain for you.
John finally showed his true colors, believing his lies after repeating them so often. If it weren't for him, I wouldn't have lost my parents. After a heated argument, John and I parted on bad terms. The next day, I listed the house they were living in with a real estate agent. Because it was close to the city and school district, and I listed it for tens of thousands below market price, many people were interested. I eventually chose a tough-looking man with a gold chain. After the transaction, I transferred the house to him. The day after the transfer, I received a call from John, as expected.
Emily, what do you mean by this? Are you trying to ruin everything between us?
I held the phone away from my ear.
Stop pretending. You were the one who ruined things first. I've sold the house. You'd better sign the divorce papers I sent you, or I won't hesitate to expose your deeds at your company.
Don't go too far! Are you trying to ruin our careers?
Listening to his angry voice, I felt no emotion and didn't even want to explain. Seeing that I remained silent, he couldn't hold back any longer.
But you want me to leave with nothing.
I suddenly laughed and kindly explained.
You're wrong. It's not leaving with nothing, it's just that we each take what's ours. I won't touch a penny of your things.
In the first 6 months of our marriage, I not only brought Mary and Jenny to live with us but also took on all the household expenses. I never took advantage of him. John, like a chicken with its neck wrung, stammered angrily before hanging up. John wouldn't obediently sign the divorce papers I gave him. I hired a group of people to harass the place where his family lived, forcing them to move. But wherever they moved, those people would find them.
Are you satisfied now?
I looked at him with a faint smile and said as I left.
It's not over yet. You'll pay for what you've done.
While John was celebrating his freedom from me, I submitted newly found evidence to the police and, together with Michael, filed a lawsuit against him.
We have enough evidence to proceed. John's going down for this.
Despite our efforts, we couldn't provide evidence of John's reckless driving from 3 years ago. With Michael's hard work, John was sentenced to 3 years in prison.
Although I wasn't entirely satisfied with the result, I knew it was the best we could achieve for now. But my dealings with John were far from over.
After John was imprisoned, Grace somehow found out where I lived and came to ask me to drop the charges.
Please, you have to drop the charges against John. He doesn't deserve this.
Grace, you know what he's done. This is his consequence.
In my previous life, she wasn't innocent in how things turned out for me, so I naturally gave her a lesson and sent her away.
You'll regret this.
After dealing with John's case, I returned to the city where I was initially transferred. The next time I heard about the Hong family was when Michael informed me that John had been released from prison.
John is out of prison now. Just thought you should know.
David was now sent to kindergarten, while his twin sister, Anna, didn't even have the chance to attend school and was confined at home doing chores.
I just wish I could go to school like David.
On his first day at kindergarten, David got into a fight with other children, and the next day, he scratched a girl's face because she didn't want to play with him.
The Hong family must be held accountable for this. We demand compensation.
Unable to come up with the money, they called me. But their problems had nothing to do with me, and I hung up before they could finish speaking.
Please, we need your help.
This is not my problem.
The matter eventually reached the police station, and under police mediation, they reluctantly paid 100,000 yuan. This amount was all they had, and John, who had just been released from prison, had to use his savings to cover the rest.
We have to turn to Sam's biological father for help.
After the divorce, Grace quickly changed the children's last names. After this incident, Grace and Jenny couldn't stay in City A and were forced to return to their hometown. However, they still didn't see any issues with David's upbringing and let him continue his reckless behavior.
I can't find a job anywhere.
John, with a criminal record, struggled to find a job. After I used some small tactics, he faced constant rejections for 2 months and couldn't even afford rent, forcing him to return to his hometown in disgrace. Even back home, John had difficulty finding work and ended up doing manual labor at construction sites, far from his once lofty self-image. My niece and my nephew, who had a rare condition, conspired to push me down the stairs while I was injured. I didn't succumb immediately to the fall, but my cries for help were met with mockery from both of them. Eventually, I succumbed to my injuries. The pain of that moment seemed to resurface vividly. I smiled innocently at Mary and Jenny.
Being a graduate student doesn't mean I know everything. When it comes to raising children, someone with experience like you, Mom, has the most authority.
Seeing that I didn't oppose her, Mary smiled contentedly and urged Jenny to take the pill. This time, I wanted to see if, without my intervention, my niece would really turn into a boy as they wished. Later, my niece was born safely. However, Mary, with her preference for boys, treated her harshly. I protected my niece, shielding her from such biased thoughts, and taught her that women are no less than men. But my genuine care was not reciprocated. Instead, I raised an ungrateful person.
You think you're better than my mom? Always acting high and mighty.
My niece and my nephew, who had a rare condition, conspired to push me down the stairs when I was injured.
Just do it. She won't see it coming.
I didn't die immediately after the fall, but my cries for help were met with mockery from my niece and nephew.
Look at her, helpless on the ground. Serves her right.
Eventually, I succumbed to excessive bleeding. The pain of that moment seemed to resurface vividly. I smiled innocently at Mary and Jenny.
Being a graduate student doesn't mean I know everything. When it comes to raising children, someone with experience like you, Mom, has the most authority.
Seeing that I didn't oppose her, Mary smiled contentedly and urged Jenny to take the pill.
See, Jenny? Your aunt agrees with me. Now take it.
This time, I wanted to see if, without my intervention, my niece would really turn into a boy as they wished. That night, Grace forcibly dragged Anna away. It wasn't until the private investigator brought me more news that I understood.
Emma came to you because Lily arranged a marriage for her with a 50-year-old alcoholic who had lost 2 wives. The old drunkard didn't mind Emma's flaws and was willing to pay a dowry of 50,000 yuan.
Meanwhile, David had caused trouble again, and Lily urgently needed the money to settle it. In the small village, Emma's future was completely sold for 50,000 yuan. I didn't feel sorry for her or any of the people from the Hong family. Their current fate was well deserved. In my previous life, I had given everything for them, only to raise a pack of ungrateful wolves. It only proved their true nature. They weren't worth my help or redemption. I settled the private investigator's fees and stopped inquiring about them. John, who lived in a daze, Sam, who treated lives as trivial, and Grace, who constantly cleaned up their messes, their lives were predictably bleak. But my life was still changing, and I only needed to look forward.